Dan's Dispatch on Talk Radio.
I'm not one of those annoying do-gooders who wastes time signing online petitions. Emails about the latest pointless campaign on change.org usually result in me hitting delete faster than Keir Starmer flip-flops on coronavirus policy. So trust me when I say my decision to sign the Great Barrington Declaration was personally significant. You've most likely not heard all that much about this great document created by three of the world's leading infectious disease epidemiologists and signed by over 12,000 public health scientists. That's because it goes against the prevailing liberal narrative that the only way to tackle the COVID pandemic is to lock the country down again, slash our dwindling civil liberties further, and make life a misery for months or even years into the future as we hopelessly wait for a vaccine that may never come. Big tech companies like Google and the vast majority of the mainstream media are colluding to make sure the document gets as little attention as possible. Sky News, that liberal news organisation, seemed to think it was a big scoop that a minuscule number of troublemakers signed it using fake names, just like every other petition circulated on the internet since the beginning of the internet. But in the future, when experts calculate the true economic and personal devastation of locking down most of the Western world for a year, denying life-saving cancer treatment, and creating a tidal wave of unnecessary poverty and mental health issues, the Great Barrington Declaration and everyone who signed it will be on the right side of history. The thesis, by the way, if you haven't heard about it, is a simple one, and it shouldn't be considered that controversial. The Great Barrington Declaration essentially says our policy approach to cope long-term with COVID needs to move towards focused protection of the vulnerable to avoid devastating effects on short and long-term public health, especially for the working class and younger members of society. The scientists state those at a low risk of being killed by COVID, and let's be honest, that is the vast majority of us, should live their lives normally to build up herd immunity to the virus through natural infection. And while that's going on, the government should redirect resources into protecting folk in the high-risk categories. Those measures would need to be much stronger than they are now. It would include a ring of steel protection around care homes and providing deliveries of food and other essentials to all retired people. Schools and universities would operate normally. The hospitality industry, arts, music, and even sports would return to normal. So too would office working, with simple measures like hand washing and a pledge to stay at home when sick. There is nothing political about this petition, despite the looney left in this country embracing damaging lockdowns with the same zealous fervour with which they tried to stop Brexit, the biggest democratic vote in our history. And all the weirdness of 2020. It is funny, isn't it, that eminent epidemiologists have become more famous and idolised than many TV stars or pop stars. So step forward Jay Bhattacharya, the professor of medicine at Stanford University, who has become a hero to me as one of the three creators of the Great Barrington Declaration. In a very compelling interview on this show, which I hope you heard yesterday, but we will be playing some of it later in the show, and you can watch it in full on Talk Radio's YouTube page. Professor Bhattacharya branded the UK's current coronavirus policy as immoral and inhumane. He insisted the lockdown strategy has created enormous death and suffering, and he also said that our current policy will extend the epidemic into the indefinite future. Herd immunity, meanwhile, according to Professor Bhattacharya, one of the best scientists in the world, has actually controlled the 4 other coronaviruses in common circulation already. And that herd immunity would mean less death and less suffering in the long term. He also rightly attacked the likes of Google and YouTube for trying to censor the petition online, suggesting tech companies that have been suppressing it are engaging in anti-science behaviour. This quote really struck me from the professor. He said, if they care about science, if they care about the truth, they will stop doing that. Well, as we know, Boris Johnson took the first tentative steps this week towards a sensible long-term coronavirus policy. He rejected a national lockdown proposed by Dr. Doom, Chris Whitty, and his scare merchant sidekick Patrick Vallance. But the pressure is going to become intense in the days and weeks to come. We've already seen today that, in fact, a vast majority of the country very soon will be plunged into some form of lockdown anyway. Northern Ireland's doing it, Nicola Sturgeon's threatening to do it too. And it may well become necessary for the Prime Minister to replace both Whitty and Vallance and his lockdown zealot Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who this week launched a scathing attack on the Great Barrington Declaration in Parliament, making it clear he is not open to another approach, even one based on the science. Here's my view. Our coronavirus cure has become far worse than the disease itself. We must never shut down the economy again. The cost to health, well-being and our economy is too great. Besides, experts agree it only temporarily delays a rise in COVID infection rates anyway. Even the World Health Organization, we heard on the show this week, now concedes there is only one long-term consequence of lockdown, and that is poverty. A different path will be needed over the next year. I'm convinced the Great Barrington Declaration provides a roadmap to get us there. But what do you think? Do you support the Great Barrington Declaration?